Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, and our ongoing study in From Paul to Valentinus by Peter Lampe. We're going to take a look at chapters 5 through 8, be pages 69 through 89, and we are now getting into the meat of the book. We're addressing Paul in this section. Let's go to block 1, the fellowship of Gentile and Jewish Christians in Rome. The synagogue conflicts of 49 AD. Gentiles began as God-fearers in the synagogue, along with new Jewish Christians, but when they attempted to share the Eucharist together at the same table, that's when the Judaic faith became very much against the Christians. Conflict erupted in the synagogue. Christians became separate from the synagogue as a result. Now the tone of the letter to the Romans seems to address Gentile Christians who are already familiar with the law. Romans 7:1. Because of being first God-fearers, they are familiar with the law. Now, Paul's letter to the Romans, he posits a Jewish understanding of justification. That attests to Paul's own background, not to his audience. He's dealing with Israel and the law, but never seeking to destroy the law. Now, Jewish Christians were also addressed in Romans in the comparison between the strong and the weak, addressing also the former God-fearers. Now, what I appreciate is that Lampe wants to emphasize the Greek concept of Suggenus. And he says, in the book of Romans, Paul emphasizes the Greek concept of Suggenus. Christians and Jews are related by origin, kinspeople, in a qualitative relationship. That's key. That is key because that reflects the very foundation of the gospel, to love one another. So I appreciate that he has given that the attention that is due to it. Suggenus, the Greek concept of being related by origin. We are all related in our Creator, the Lord Jesus Christ. So, block 1 gives us the concept of Suggenus, an important Greek concept for Paul. Now, block 2, we look at the Pauline educational process. And he does attribute Hebrews to Paul. The book of Hebrews was directed toward Rome in the late 1st century, and chapter 11 is the famous faith chapter, and it does reflect a Hellenistic Jewish school methodology and exegesis as typology. And he says that's indicative, Lampe says that is indicative of Roman Jewish Christian, Jewish Hellenistic school. So we're talking about traditional Jewish teaching. A Jewish Christian Gnosis existed because they actually had time for that kind of activity. That became Paul's educational process, Jewish Christian Gnosis. And pay attention to that because later we know from the title that Lampe is going to introduce Valentinus, the Gnostic. So pay attention to this Gnosis here. Paul posited a Jewish Christian Gnosis as his educational process. So block 2, note 3, Paul's objective educational process demanded reciprocal fellowship between the wealthy and the poor. sharing the experience of others as agape self-giving love. Paul taught for 2 years in Rome, even as a prisoner. So even as a prisoner, he was an educator, a Christian educator. But he taught a Jewish Christian Gnosis. A Jewish Christian Gnosis was the Pauline educational teaching. Now, at this time, we're talking about 64 AD, or 49 AD to 64 AD, but now we'll take a look at 64 AD in Block 3, persecution under Nero. 64 AD, Christians were tortured, burned, and crucified. Nero called Christians outcasts of society. They didn't worship the Roman gods. They were called outcasts of society. And it was a sizable population at the time. Now, Christians practice, because they worshiped Christ, they practiced wisdom as works. Some even took up self-enslavement to serve the poor, to assist the poor. Again, we're told that Paul emphasized the basic aspect of the gospel as loving one another. They took up a blessed level of genuine sacrifice, believing that wisdom must become manifest as good works. Wisdom, the Jewish Christian Gnosis for Paul, is a Jewish Christian Gnosis evidenced in works of agape self-giving love, works of bearing one's cross for the benefit of the poor, for the benefit of the less fortunate, for the benefit of the persecuted. So chapters 5 through 8 give us what we need. We actually get, in Block 1, we get Block 1, Note 5, we get the all-important concept for Paul of Suggenus. Suggenus, related by origin in the Creator. We are one in the Creator, and the Creator is Christ, as we know from the Gospel of John and from Paul and Romans. And then in Block 2, we learn that the Pauline educational process was one of Jewish Christian Gnosis. Note 2. Jewish Christian Gnosis, which will become very much in conflict with Gnosticism. But for now, let's just make a point to understand Paul taught a Jewish Christian Gnosis, and Note 3 there, Block 2, Note 3, and founded upon a reciprocal fellowship between the wealthy and those in need. So it was a Jewish Christian Gnosis of agape, self-giving, love, and sacrifice. And then Block 3, even under the 64 AD persecution of Nero, when Christians were considered outcasts, Christians within their fellowship served the poor, served the needy, served those less fortunate. They reflected Gnosis as good works, bearing one's cross. And that must be what we take as a foundational teaching in this lesson of chapters 5 through 8. We now begin. We get through page 89 here, but what this does is, I guess, around page 90, we are now officially into the meat of the book. We're going to be looking at that transition from Paul to Valentinus, that transition from Jewish Christian Gnosis to Gnosticism Gnosis. And it is very, very dramatically different and very dramatically in conflict, which I'm sure Professor Lampe will point out. But in this lesson, we learn of Paul's concept of Suggenus, related by origin. Jews and Christians are related by origin in the eternal Creator. We learn of the Jewish-Christian Gnosis as Paul's educational process. And we learn that wisdom is not theoretical. Wisdom is both theoretical and practical. Theoretical and practical, it is both. Faith without works is dead. Paul believed that, not just James the Just. Paul believed that. Actually, the Apostle John, Paul the Apostle, and James the Just all believed that faith without works is dead. This is a beautiful section in the book. We're officially into the meat of the book, the meat of the manuscript now. That's going to wrap up pages 69 to 89. Now the next lesson will be beginning at chapter 9, and we're going to go pages 88 to 108, okay? Next lesson will be page 88 to 108. 88 to 108. That'll wrap up pages 69 to 89, chapters 5 through 8. 5 through 8.